The Porsche 356 is a piece of motoring history, and while it still remains as beautiful as ever, it's starting to get a bit long in the tooth. Oxfordshire-based company Electrogenic thinks that it might have found a way to keep them on the road and move them into the 21st century by removing the 4-cylinder boxer engine and replacing it with an electric motor. We caught up with Steve Drummond, director and founder of Electrogenic, to find out a bit more about the company and its recent Porsche 356 conversion. Steve, thank you very much for having us down to your wonderful factory here in sunny Oxford.
Absolutely delighted.
I think the first question, and possibly the question on everyone's lips, is why would someone take out the 4-cylinder boxer and put an electric motor in?
Because it makes it better. If you drive the original, it actually had a beautiful engine in it, but it's a very narrow torque band, so very fussy in the gears. So if you convert it, you've got the wider torque band.
Yeah, that brings me on to something that I think is really interesting about what you guys do here at Electrogenic, is you keep the gears in, which is not something that we see with a lot of other electric cars.
I mean, we often do. It depends on what the customer wants. The customer who ordered this car came to us in our Tesla, and the fact that we could take him for a drive in an electric car with gears blew his mind, because this is an enthusiast car. You want to drive it in with the gears, you want to change down and power out the corners, you want to do all of that, and the fact you can, and it's electric and it's clean and green, perfect.
And that is the original gearbox?
It's the original gearbox, yes.
But the motor is one that you buy off the shelf, is that correct?
We buy in the motors and the batteries, all the rest of our tech is all our own.
And so do you take a really kind of holistic view with the cars when you're developing them?
It starts with what the customer wants, how the customer is going to drive the vehicle, what they want to get from it, in terms of performance, in terms of driving style, in terms of range. And then it's about system design to make sure that that is delivered. Because we're designing the electronics and all of that, we have standard systems, we have a standard approach to, for example, all of the safety systems that go into the cars, all of that. But transmissions are individual to each model. The battery arrangement physically in the car is, and how we fit things physically, and that's all individual to each model.
So how long does the kind of design process take from conception and with the customer to finally having it in their hands?
Yeah, so if it's a car that we've not converted before, a model we haven't done before, about 3 months or so, the car has to come in. We prefer it to be driven in so we can get an idea of if there's anything wrong with the car, you know, brake, suspension, those things, but also how it drives originally, so we've got a comparator to when it's electric. Then we strip everything out, engine, gearbox, whatever needs to come out, and then scan it, and then there's a whole design process, have the parts that need to be machined, manufactured out, delivered in, and then we do the conversion. So the whole of that process takes 3 months or so.
Yeah.
If it's a car we've done before, we've got all the designs on the CAD. So press a button, send those off to be machined. And when we have all of the components together, bring the car in, it's about 4 weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that.
And moving on to the company a bit more generally, could you tell us a bit more about the kind of how you came to be? What was the first project and inception?
First project was a Beetle, actually. The whole idea was really about accessibility. You know, I've had a lot of old cars. Talking to my business partner Ian, and he was trying to get me interested in another old car. I said, no, yeah, but the trouble is that they're too slow to be pleasant to drive in modern traffic. You know, you can't pull out of a T-junction or go down a slip road. You get stuck between big trucks. It's not so nice. So the idea is how to uprate the engines. That's sort of annoying too, done that a few times. Then electric was, well, maybe we could make it electric, and did a whole bunch of research, and it became clear that it was just about starting to be possible to make an electric car that you'd actually want to own. And so that's what we set out to do. We developed all our own tech to go into these cars because we couldn't buy the tech that we wanted to exist. You know, we kept on buying parts and thinking, well, we wouldn't really do it like that. We should do it like this. So more broadly, where the business is going is to then capitalise on the technology we've developed and continue to expand that to get it into other people's cars. Right. So if you look at small volume manufacturers, in 8 years' time they can't sell cars anymore. At the moment they're buying engines from Ford or from BMW, so they can wait for Ford or BMW to give them electrification solution, or they can you know, Ford and BMW got plenty to do. You know, they can come talk to us. We love the idea of working with manufacturers for their heritage fleets.
Yeah.
You know, people who have very loyal customer bases. And of course, then there's a lot of restomod type outfits and also car restorers who have customers who are interested.
I can imagine there's some people that aren't particularly best pleased when they see an electric motor in a 64 356. What do you say to those people?
I say a few things. First of all, if you don't want to convert your car, don't. No one's making you. You might think differently in 10 years' time when you can't get petrol, but that's a whole other story. Classic cars are very romantic, but the reality of owning one is not so romantic. And so what you find is that these cars aren't used very much. If you convert it, all of a sudden, you've got something that all you have to do is get in, turn the key, and off you go, and you don't have to think about it. So all of a sudden, the ornament that sits in your garage is something you're driving every day, and then you have the joy and beauty of driving it every day. And that's what the car's for. The car's for using, it's not for looking at.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build cars that people want to drive, and that's the idea.
So having learned all about the company and the car from Steve, let's see how she drives. We took a short trip over to Bicester Heritage, a business campus dedicated to historic motoring, to get behind the wheel. Driving the 356 on road, as we are here at Bicester Heritage, a site just down the road from the Electrogenic factory dedicated to the British classic car industry, a couple of things immediately become apparent. The first being just how easy everything is. Obviously, being an electric car, you don't have to worry about stalling or changing gear and matching the revs and things like that. But it's just so straightforward, and you can set off in basically any gear. The second thing is just how beautiful and lovely it is in this interior. Everything is original, everything. And it's just a joy to sit here and just be in this car. And the fact that everything is so easy on top of it makes this maybe the perfect classic car. In terms of sound, while that was obviously a huge part of the original 356 with that 4-cylinder boxer engine, you now get a very slight whir, which does go up and down as you kind of climb through the rev range. Perhaps not one for the purist, but it is still engaging enough to make it exciting. You know, while stuff does kind of whir and creak a bit sometimes, it just adds to the fun and the charm of it all. It's a proper experience driving this, and it would be remiss of me not to say that putting an electric motor in has taken anything away from the kind of driving experience. It's just as exciting and engaging and as fun as it would be in a classic 356. Of course, while all of the original gauges and instruments are present, so is all of the switchgear. We have these lovely kind of tactile switches for the indicators and the windscreen wipers, and all of this is still in perfect working order. We have a beautiful old-fashioned Blaupunkt radio player, which is just fantastic, not only to look at but also to use. It's beautifully tactile, everything clicks and has that old classic car feel, and none of that has been removed, and nor should it have been. Of course, the big question that many people will have is whether this electrified 356 is as engaging and as fun to drive as a regular petrol-powered 356 would be. And in my view, it is just as enjoyable, it is just as fun, and it still provides that same classic car nostalgia that you would get from the regular petrol-powered version. However, obviously with it being powered by electricity and not petrol, you don't have to worry about overheating, you don't have to worry about getting stuck behind something in traffic. You have that instantaneous torque and you have that reliability of the electric motor, which means that all of the potential stresses that you would get from driving a classic car are removed. You are left with the kind of perhaps the most central parts of it, which is the feel of the brakes, the feel of the steering, the interior, the view out, and just the whole romance of it. Of course, while driving the 356 on the road is easy, I wonder what it would be like on the track. We're driving the 356 on the old runway here at Bicester Heritage, which used to be an RAF base back in the day. The 356 weighs just over a tonne, 1,076 kilos to be precise. In terms of weight distribution, about 60% of it is hanging over the rear axle, as you'd expect from a classic Porsche. That rear-mounted electric motor is pushing out 120 horsepower and 235 Nm of torque. That's a decent power to weight ratio, but to be clear, this isn't Tesla quick. It will hit 60 miles an hour in around 6 to 7 seconds, but again, that's not really the point. Top speed, Electrogenic won't say for certain, this is a customer car after all, but somewhere around 130 miles an hour seems to be in the right ballpark. Compared to the original 356, it's both quicker off the mark and faster at the top end. It's certainly no milk float. In terms of range, the 356 can manage somewhere in the region of 150 miles. That might not sound like a huge amount considering that some new cars can get more than 300 miles from a single charge. However, as Steve told us, the range obviously depends on the number of batteries in the car. Bigger cars obviously can take more batteries without upsetting the handling balance and can hit 200 miles on a single charge. Smaller cars, such as the 356 or the Mini that Electrogenic has recently converted, have less room for batteries and consequently have a shorter range. Steve reckons they can hit somewhere between 100 to 150 miles. The electric motor, rather than spinning all the way from 0 until its top speed, tops out at 8,000 RPM, and you will have to change gears should you hit max RPM in any of the 4 gears. The gear stick has an incredibly long throw and you have to physically shift your body around to find the right cog. While that might sound like a bit of a hassle, it really is good fun and it gives you all those warm, nostalgic feelings that any petrol-powered car from this period would offer. When you get to a corner, and you typically arrive at them quite quickly, that old car feel continues. The brakes are quite light at the top end and they really start to grab as you push through. Similarly, the Porsche rolls quite a bit under braking and as you head through the corners. And with all that rolling in the corners, you'll find yourself spilling out of the armchair soft seats. But of course, that's far from a bad thing. This 356 isn't a race car, and nor is it a resto-modded, fully upgraded and updated car. It's simply a 356 with an electric motor and some batteries, designed to keep it on the road for the next 5 decades, just as it has been for the previous 5. So, having driven the Porsche 356 on both road and track and getting some great insight from Steve, it's clear to see that while this might not be the last word in purity for the Porsche enthusiast, it might just be the best way to own a classic car. You don't have to worry about the battery going flat, you don't have to worry about it overheating, but you still get all of the same quirks and environment and ambience that you would get from an original classic. If we had the money to buy a classic car, we'd probably take it here.